August 18th, and NHC indicating the Caribbean and the tropical Atlantic will be coming together during this upcoming week. First of all, Invest 97 is in the Caribbean, and the range of tracks carries it mostly into the Yucatan, and then from what I saw of the GFS, that brings it over the other side into the Gulf of Mexico and towards South Texas around Wednesday or Thursday. That's still a long ways off. And the intensity data seems to indicate that storm will probably remain a tropical storm. We can see that all through the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Southwest Atlantic, the temperatures are about 84, and we really need anything over 80. So this is good, and it is warmer in the Gulf. One problem, though, is the shear is kind of high, especially across Cuba, Dominica, and anywhere out in the northern Caribbean. So that's going to be an issue. And there's the range of tracks for the other storm, pretty good clustering there, taking it towards Puerto Rico or just north of there. And there it is on the shear chart. That's going to carry it northward. Now, there is this very strong area of shear at this time. The question is, what is it going to do 3 or 4 days from now? I did start looking around for some deep shear products, and a lot of model sites neglect this. I did find this one from the Climate Prediction Center. And let's see, the track is pretty much going like that. And that's taking it right through this area of unfavorable wind shear. All the blue is high shear. So I'm not really too sure why it's going for intensification. Maybe there's not enough to suppress it. But, it's not developing into a major hurricane, so that could be the shear acting on it. Anyway, if you know of any good shear products similar to this, definitely pass that on. And there's the current range of winds. Definitely got strengthening on that, and a few of the models have got that up, coming close to hurricane strength in about day 4, day 5. And there's a quick look at the track of Invest 98, heading pretty much right for Puerto Rico, just north of there. And that'll probably end up in the Gulf also, but that's going to be a week from now, so we shall see what happens with that. Here's how things look on the upper level chart, and a big thing that we see is a complete lack of easterly flow except in Arizona. This is almost a early fall pattern, and you can see the very strong northerly component in the central U.S. So we got this very strong ridge built up from the Rockies into Alberta. Almost certainly it's warm and sunny in that area. And then we got this trough over the east coast. Things are going to be unsettled in that area. And within that trough, we've got a couple of major shortwaves. One right there, another right there. So those are two potential areas of upward motion, especially right there in Ohio and Indiana. Then another area out over the Maritimes. And in between, probably a little area of temporarily favorable weather. Of course, we'll see on the surface and satellite if that's the case. And then upstream from the troughs and downstream from the ridge, this is an area of subsidence, so we would expect to see high pressure across Minnesota, Western Ontario, and Manitoba. And then I don't know if you can see it, but there's another wave right here. Now, the 250 millibar chart is not really suited for finding short waves. We really need to go down to 500 millibars or 700 millibars to find those. So here's the 18Z GFS 6-hour forecast at 500 millibars. This is in the mid-levels, and this will be more sensitive to short waves. Since this is 18Z instead of 12Z, this will be very slightly different from the Canadian chart I showed you. But yeah, you can definitely see that wave right there across Illinois, western Kentucky. So that's going to be a little further south than where the upper 250 millibar chart indicated it. And then we can see that other action out there in the Maritimes way off the edge. And then we've got that other wave up here from Seattle northwestward. What we see here is a rare 600 decameter contour. We don't see that very often, but there it is. So likely it's going to be quite warm out there in Utah, Nevada, and Arizona. And then just a very quick look at the week ahead. What we see is things dominated by that huge subtropical high out there in the southwestern U.S. Looks unsettled in the southeast U.S. with a trough kind of taking hold in that area. And then we've got this northerly flow here, so if we have enough moisture out in the southern plains, this could be a pattern for northwesterly flow storms. The problem is, if we look at the dew point, we can see things are dominated by high pressure associated with that northerly flow, so that's bringing cool air and drier conditions to much of the U.S. So it's going to be hard getting northwesterly flow storms going. In fact, let's see, return flow, it's trying. Well, there's some right there, a little corridor of maybe moisture from evapotranspiration around Friday. But down in the Gulf, we've got some sort of tropical storm down there. That's from probably Invest 97, and that's diverting some of the moisture west and south. So that'll interfere with the moisture supply. And I think the main chances of any storms are going to be mostly up in the northern plains and possibly out there near Kansas next week. And you can see how that plays out on the total accumulated precipitation. You can see the impact of that trough right there in the southeast. Look at all that rain. Anywhere from, what's that, blue and pink, half an inch up to maybe 2 inches. And then this is around the weekend. Looks like things are active, mostly in the northern plains. Spotty precipitation in the central U.S. itself. And then we see the impact from that tropical storm coming into the Texas coast around midweek. But that's a long ways off, and we're likely going to see some adjustment to the position of that system. Here's how things look in the southwestern U.S. this afternoon. You can see the northerly flow in Texas and Oklahoma, kind of a weak cold front pushing into Lufkin, San Antonio, and Del Rio, with switch over to northerly winds, but still very warm. This is all being driven by high pressure up there in Iowa and Minnesota. And then we find the tail end of the front out there in eastern New Mexico. Looks like the heat low is setting in once again across southwestern Arizona. And we've had some record heat. I talked about this yesterday during the supporter stream. Death Valley hitting 130 degrees. First 130 degree reading since the 1910s. Here's what the surface map looked like on Sunday at 22Z, right around the time of that extreme temperature. Death Valley located right there. And I know this chart may be a little hard to read, but I wanted to enhance the mountainous terrain. And you can see the Sierra Nevadas right there. Temperatures, yeah, pretty warm, 107, 102, 110 near Stockton. So definitely some warm readings. 115 there near Needles, and 112 at Phoenix. Now, we don't have any official federal hourly stations there at Death Valley. That Park Service readout is about the best we can get, but that's official as far as the Weather Service is concerned. Now, one thing I did notice is that the NAM and also the GFS were indicating very high temperatures. They really over-forecast the highs. They were going for 116 and 117. Actual temperatures were about 9 degrees cooler than this. I'm not sure what the origin of this high bias came from. It's very weird. And there's a photograph that I took back in the 90s. That's the lowest elevation in Death Valley. And you can see it's mostly a salt surface there. Although those minerals, they get carried down to the very lowest elevations, and they sit there for thousands of years. And that's the road that goes right through the middle, about a foot higher than the Salt Lake itself. And those are the mountains off to the west. Yep, definitely some very inhospitable terrain. And then, returning back to today, it's been very warm out there, and you can see a heat trough across the San Joaquin Valley up into the area north of Sacramento. And at this hour, which is Currently, this is an 11 a.m. Pacific chart, and you can see a lot of areas up into the mid-90s. And here we can definitely see that anticyclonic flow. You've probably noticed the cloud patterns kind of spinning like that, and that's that subtropical high we've got parked across the desert there near Las Vegas. And another very important thing that we see is the low cloud field is being driven southward. That's the reason we can't get any northwest flow storms developing. For that, the upper level conditions are fine, but what we need is in the lower levels, a corridor of southerly flow going up into the high plains. And typically during northwest flow events, we see development in this area right here. And then during the evening and overnight, that moves into Oklahoma, Dallas, or even all the way down to Abilene and Austin. In the northwest U.S. and the northern plains, mostly dominated by this heat low from Saskatchewan down to Rapid City and Denver, very warm temperatures, lots of mid and low 90s. And then if we go east, we can see that old polar high moving southeast through Minnesota and Iowa. And then on the back end of that, we've got the warm air advection moving up into the northern plains. Just a little bit of residual moisture, 60s dew points, but not quite enough to get storms going. And then if we go a little further north, we pick up that warm front in the Winnipeg area. Things getting unsettled on the west coast. We see things looking a little bit stormy there, some marginal VFR ceilings around Victoria Island. And if we go far enough north, we see pressure falls way up off the top of the chart. But that's going to be weather that will affect mostly British Columbia. But we do have that progressive flow aloft, and you can see a lot of westerly flow to the cirrus. A little bit of residual moisture in the higher elevations of Montana. You can see the dew points aren't all that high in that area, but we've got enough mid-level moisture and instability to support some storms on the higher elevations. In the northeast, you can see a big change from a week ago. Remember, we had 80s and some 90s all the way up to James Bay and Hudson Bay. Well, we've gotten rid of that. Now it's down in the 50s, and we've got polar air production pushing cold air into the Great Lakes and Northeast. So at this hour, early afternoon, lots of 70s in New York and New England, and even all the way down to West Virginia, mid-70s. We do pick up a frontal system down to the south. We're going to cover that in the southeast segment, and we can see it down there. But looking back up north, cold air advection pattern. As I mentioned yesterday, this is kind of like the opposite of lake effect showers. This is like land effect showers, if you want to call it that. Very strongly heated terrain beneath very cool mid and upper level conditions. So as a result, we have lots of showers across New York, Pennsylvania, Quebec, Ontario, and New England. There's our southeast U.S. map. What we see here is a tremendous lack of isobars. Pretty much none in the southeastern U.S., but we do have a frontal system, a little bit of cyclonic turning of the winds just north of Memphis, and we got the winds there at Memphis out of the west as a result. The better moisture, you can see, well, we don't have a whole lot of it, but there are 70s in South Carolina, southern Georgia down to Florida, and a little pocket of 70s up there near Fort Campbell, Kentucky. And a lot of that is due to that front and the flow turning out of the north, and as a result, dew points are down to the 50s and lower 60s across much of North Texas. But where we do have 70s dew points, we've got storms, and there they are, out there all the way from Columbia, South Carolina, down towards Waycross, Georgia. And, of course, Florida getting its usual active summertime convective activity. But not much of that elsewhere in the southeast U.S. And there's the convective weather hazards. Looks like the western U.S. getting a few marginally strong storms due to the heat. And out east we do have plenty of thunderstorms, but most of that should stay below severe limits. And before we go, there's a little bit of the thunderstorm activity there in Florida. Looks like a pretty good cluster of storms up there in the northeast coastal region. And then down here you can see an outflow boundary, actually a couple of them right there, contrasting with the relatively clear air out near Melbourne and Vero Beach. And then here's another little cluster of storms up there in Kentucky. You can see none of these look severe. Those again are multi-cell clusters. And why not look at Maine? There's a couple of thunderstorms up in that area along that front. Looks like the stronger ones around the Bangor area. Some storms should be in there in the next 10 or 15 minutes. And there's a very slight bowed appearance on some of these cells, so I wouldn't be surprised if they had a little bit of 30 to 40 mile an hour wind with them. All right, that's all I got for this edition of Forecast Lab. We'll see you back tomorrow. If you have any questions or you want to talk to other viewers, leave a comment there on YouTube. And of course, like and subscribe. It would be very much appreciated. All right, take care, and we will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.